Well, hello St.Barts School. Welcome to our very first Lighthouse Assembly for 2021. This year we're going to do things a little bit different. I've got some friends from the local churches who are going to come and help us think about and talk about the assembly. Let's let them introduce themselves.
Hello. Many of you, I expect, will remember us from Open the Book. I'm Tony.
And I'm Ruth.
Hello, my name's Heather and I live in Quorn and I worship at the Baptist Church in the village.
Hello everyone, my name is Dawn. I go to St.Barts Church in Quorn and you may recognise me from Open the Book, Wendy's worship workshop.
Hi St Bartholomew's, it's Wendy here from St Bartholomew's Church in the village in Quorn. And you may recognise me from doing assemblies in school and Wendy's worship workshop and just from seeing me in the playground when you're out playing.
Well, it's time to crack on. I hope you enjoy our first assembly. Today we're going to look at one of the parables that Jesus told. Now, a parable is a special kind of story which has a hidden meaning. Sometimes you have to think really hard when you hear the story to work out what the meaning is. Today's parable is about a shepherd who had 100 sheep, and one day one of them got lost.
These days sheep are kept in fields which are surrounded by high stone walls or a hedge or a fence. It keeps the sheep inside, keeps them safe, and it keeps people out. And probably every single day the farmer or the shepherd will go out and check on them. And they will probably look a little bit like this. They'll be wearing their overalls, they'll have their boots, and especially this time of year they'll be wearing a coat and a hat to keep them warm and dry. And they may still have one of these with them. This is a shepherd's crook, which is very useful for controlling the sheep and rounding them up. Now also when they go out to the sheep, they probably ride out on a quad bike and they probably have their trusty sheepdog with them. The sheepdog is commanded through whistles and calls and they're used to round up the sheep and put them into the pen. Now in Jesus' time shepherds would have looked very different. They would have looked more like this, but they still had their trusty crook. They also would have had a club which they would have used to fight off wolves and bears and lions. It was very dangerous out there for the sheep. The other big difference was that the shepherds spent their time with the sheep all the time. Day and night and for months on end they would stay out in the fields looking after their sheep. They would lead them around for fresh grass and looking for clean water and to protect them from the wild animals as well. They didn't have a quad bike, they'd have to walk around with their sheep, and they didn't have a sheepdog either. Instead, what they did was they trained their sheep to obey their voice, and they would give all their sheep names. So they would probably look at a sheep and see if there's something about it that would help them remember their name. So let's say this sheep over here has got a blob on its back, that one's going to be called Patch. Whereas this one over here is a bit more woolly than the rest, we'll call that one Fluffy. And the sheep would hear the shepherd's voice and hear them calling them by name and would obey them. And as the shepherd led the sheep around, he would keep them close. And as he led them, he would go first, using his staff to prod the sheep and keep them close to him because he didn't want them to be attacked by wild animals. And if they wandered up, he'd call to them, "Come back, Bob, Bob, this way," or "Fluffy, Fluffy, come here." And the sheep would stay close by. It was tough work to be a shepherd, but good shepherds looked after their sheep. They cared about their sheep. Some religious teachers came to Jesus and they started grumbling. Why was he hanging around with all the bad people and going to their house for meals? Why wasn't he spending his time with the good people like them? So to help them, Jesus told them a story. He said once there was a shepherd who had 100 sheep, and at night time he was counting his sheep. 1, 2, 3, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99. There was one missing sheep. So what the shepherd did was he left the 99 and he went looking for that one sheep. And he searched everywhere, all through the hills, calling it by name. And finally, he found his missing sheep. It's got itself all caught up in a thorn bush. So very carefully, he grabs hold of the sheep, rescues it, and because it's exhausted, he puts it onto his shoulders and carries it all the way home. And when he gets back, he calls all his family and friends and says, "I lost my sheep, and now I've found it. Let's have a party."
Let's spend a moment thinking about the story. Maybe one part of it has jumped out for you as being really special. Well, the most important part of the story is actually the shepherd. And we've discovered today that the shepherd knew their sheep and he gave each one of them names. Now that would have meant that when he was counting the sheep, he not only realised that one of the sheep was missing, he probably already knew which sheep it was. And in our story today, I gave that sheep the name Bob. But what if, instead of having names, the sheep were given numbers? All of a sudden, that sheep doesn't seem so important after all. And maybe the shepherd would say, well, I've got the 99. If sheep number 37 is stupid enough to wander off, I'll just stay here and I'll look after the ones that are doing what they're supposed to. But we discovered in the story that that sheep was important to him. And the shepherd left the 99 and went looking for Bob. Now, this story isn't really about shepherd and his sheep. It's actually about God and how God looks after all people. He's not just caring for the good people, the nice people. Every single person is important to God, no matter what. Even if they get lost, even if they make a mess of things, Jesus is saying that all people are special. So think for a moment, if you didn't have a name, but instead you were given a number. Now that might sound quite cool at first, but as we start to think about it, we start to realise, that makes me sound like I'm not that important. Fortunately, each one of us does have a name. So maybe instead of Bob, you could write your name in the sheep instead. And that tells us that each one of us has got a name. Each one of us is known. Each one of us is important. Each one of us is special. And each one of us is equally loved. And that means that not only am I loved, but you're loved. And that also means the person sitting next to us is loved. And the person who lives down our street is loved as well. What Jesus is saying is each one of us is known to God. He knows us by name, and each one of us is equally special. I want to finish by saying a prayer. Dear Lord, again, I thank you that you love each and every single one of us. Each one of us is special to you. Each one of us is known to you by name. Thank you, that means that I'm important, I'm cared for, I'm loved. But that also means the person sitting next to me, the person down the street, the person I might meet in town is also important and special and known to you as well, because everybody is equally loved by you. Amen. Thank you for listening. I'm looking forward to seeing you very, very soon.